Treat yourself like the most important bill that you ever have to pay. And do that every single month. And then that builds a good habit. So then when you have things like an emergency fund set up, that's when we can start looking at putting money in the stock market. Psychologically, when you carve that money off up top, after you pay off all your bills, the money that's left over, it's like a freedom to spend account. It's guilt-free spending.
Hey everybody, this is Rodney Gullatte. Welcome to the show. We're here today to talk about the expertise in our community and interview some incredible leaders here in Colorado Springs and the Front Range in El Paso County and everywhere else. We want to give a special thanks to the SCP Hotel for hosting us today in this beautiful spot. Thank you so much. Make sure you make your way to 2850 South Circle Drive and check out this beautiful location here at the SCP Hotel. Monthly subscriptions to access pools, gyms, beautiful bar, great space, great Wi-Fi. Come here and work, bring your business meetings, awesome spot. So thanks again for hosting us. And I also want to give a special thanks to Guerrilla Media. Thank you so much for putting this show together. Thank you for being a member of the Colorado Springs Black Chamber of Commerce and really dominating this community and doing such a great job with your award-winning company and your beautiful family. So thank you. And we are here today with Dr. Kenya Lee, our co-host, board member for the Colorado Springs Black Chamber of Commerce and co-owner of Purely Redefined. Thank you, Kenya, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
This is awesome,
Good to see you all.
Yes.
I'm so excited about this.
And we are interviewing today our guest, Mr. Harrison Hunter, a certified financial planner and a financial expert at Northwestern Mutual. Thank you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hello, Mr. Harrison, Professor Harrison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So you wear a lot of hats, my brother.
Yeah.
Certified financial planner. So there's a lot of people out there calling themselves financial advisors, and they don't have any certifications. And I myself am somebody that appreciates the hard work goes into having certifications. So what's the difference between you with a CFP and those out there calling themselves financial advisors?
And before you answer that, explain what CFP means for other people.
So CFP means I'm board certified through our board that runs a lot of financial planning. So it's a board certification. And in order to be certified as a CFP, essentially it's a long course and it covers the major 7 areas of financial planning, everywhere from general principles of financial planning, investments, taxation, business planning, estate planning, and insurance planning, and kind of everywhere across that spectrum. And the reason why it's such a hard certification to obtain is because each one of those are one certification in itself. And this is one of those exams that you have to have a high level of knowledge across the board and not just in one specific area. So to that point, when we talk about just financial advisors versus like what a CFP is, at the end of the day, again, you can find a lot of good financial advisors. Just because they're not a CFP does not mean that they don't know what they're doing or they don't know how to plan. But when we talk about what a CFP does, it sets a certain standard of what you can expect. And you know that they are actual planners and they're looking at the whole picture rather than some advisors typically have a certain expertise when it comes to just managing investments or just managing insurance, but very few of them actually take into account the full picture and how does one side of the picture play into the other. I like to say you got to have an offensive side of the plan and a defensive side of your plan because just one side of the ball does not work.
And you also have a goal, and the goal has to be wealth.
Exactly.
Correct?
At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that it was actually funny because I just did a seminar with Solid Rock down there for their community investment trust.
Oh, Pastor Ben.
Yep.
Hey, Pastor Ben.
And James Johnson down there is helping run that.
Good brother.
And one of the things we were talking about in that conversation is when we talk about even the wealth gap, when we talk about communities of color versus maybe the other white communities that we were talking about, right, in that wealth gap. The funny thing is over the years, the income gap has closed, but the wealth gap has gotten wider.
Why?
Because it's not so much about how much money you're making a lot of the time. It's more about what are you actually doing with your money?
Right on.
And are you actually building it in assets and not liabilities? This is one of the biggest conversations I have with people. Because an asset is something that you'll always at least get your money back for.
Yeah.
Liabilities are typically something that you will never get the value for what you pay. And it's usually things that we consume, things like cars, right? A lot of things that we understand are important and we do want them, but we need to learn how to prioritize building wealth in addition to just those things we can have along the way.
And for simple people, basically, you need your money to make money for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Your money needs to be working for you.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yep.
So there was a book I read as a grown man called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I tell you, the feeling I had after reading it was I was kind of annoyed. I was a little agitated because this book is not a new book.
Yeah.
And I had never seen this knowledge. And it's knowledge that our people have not been historically passing down to each other, but it's in the book.
Yeah.
What other kind of knowledge are people missing out of these books? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Check that book out. It's easy to get.
Yeah. So it's funny because even myself personally, I don't think I read a book myself until I graduated college, like one that I chose to read and I wanted to read.
Yeah, right on.
And it's funny because when I did, I was like, holy cow. There is actually very tangible information that I can apply in my life. And so, again, I think it starts with seeking knowledge above all else.
Also, that information is really simple.
Yes, really simple.
It's a paperback book. It's not that long. That information is very simple. Get it.
Yeah. And another book that I would say is probably one of the best books I've ever read or even listened to about money is called The Psychology of Money. That's really one of those, it does a really good job of putting these complex concepts into very understandable terms and also helping us understand how we think about money and why are we actually even pursuing it, right? And helping us prioritize those things. So again, I would say it does start with knowledge. And again, start with something simple just to get interested. And if you find that, hey, you know what, this is really interesting to me, then you can start finding those next avenues to continue to build on that foundational knowledge, right? Because again, knowledge is the most important piece. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I do as an advisor. Like I tell people all the time, yes, we are technically sales professionals, but I don't think I sell anything.
So since we're talking about simple knowledge, how would you define financial security?
Well, again, it's funny because when we talk about financial security, a lot of people will say a lot of different things like, oh, having $1 million in the bank or doing this or doing that. And it's like, yeah, that sounds all nice. But at the end of the day, the true definition of financial security, in my opinion, is always having money and options in the best and worst times. Because we can't always just think that everything's going to go according to plan. It's going to be sunshine and daisies every day. A financial plan that works is one that works even if things are not going according to plan. And that's one of the biggest things that I think is what people really are looking for when we talk about financial security.
Yeah. I have read and heard from several people that in economic downturns, depressions, recessions, that's really the only time that new millionaires and billionaires are made, because they instead of looking at it as, oh, woe is me, they look for the opportunities.
Yep.
And right now we're in a very
volatile,
curious market. So would you give us some recommendations about what types of things we should be looking for so that we can actually better ourselves financially?
Yeah. So I'm going to take a step back to even talk about what you originally talked about.
Okay.
And one of the things is, and when we talk about building wealth, and especially when it comes to investing, the biggest mistake people have is we rationally know what we should do, but we make our decisions emotionally. Because I can ask everybody and their mom how you win in the stock market. And everybody tells me you're supposed to buy low and then you sell high. But you want to know what typically happens when our emotions come into play?
I want
Inverse.
it. I want it.
Exactly. The exact opposite. Yeah. Because again, when I talk about that, it's both in good times and in bad. Because again, when we talk about things going good, it's funny how many people want to jump on the bandwagon of like, oh, people are making so much money in this stock and this mutual fund. That's what I need to be in.
But it's already too late because it's already maxed.
Exactly. And it's almost that fear of missing out analogy of like, hey, we're scared that we're missing out on all this money that people are making, that we want to go chase it after we already kind of, and I don't want to say you missed that boat because frankly, the best time to invest was probably about 50 years ago. The second best time to invest was today, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you can, it makes sense to start when you can, right?
Yes.
But obviously, if you have the opportunities and you have the position where you can take advantage of opportunities, there's smarter ways to do it.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about when the markets go down, that's when people panic out. And everybody wants to invest like Warren Buffett. Everybody's like, oh yeah, Warren Buffett. Like I want to just be like Warren Buffett, right? The funny thing is when you actually listen to what Warren Buffett says, he also talks about one of his biggest core beliefs is when others are greedy, that's when he's fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And when others are fearful,
That's
when he's greedy.
Exactly. You
And
buy
that's
low.
exactly what you're talking about. And that's how he's, and the funny thing is also on top of that, when we talk about wealth, and you talk about Warren Buffett's wealth, most of his wealth comes from his time in investing, because he started investing when he was like 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And over 90% of his wealth came after he turned age 60.
Yep.
Because that's the power of compounding interest over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Tell me
Right?
about that. What does this compound interest mean?
So compounding interest, at the end of the day, there's simple interest and then there's compounding interest, right? Most people think of simple interest, but compounding interest, and even Albert Einstein says, is the eighth wonder of the world, right? He's probably one of the smartest people that anybody would mostly think of. And if he doesn't really, he thinks it's a wonder and how fascinating it is, I think we should actually at least pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way compounding works is you start earning money on the money that you're earning, right? Because if we did a simple
This is
interest
what I was saying about your money's got to make money for you.
for you,
Right.
and then the money that you
Save
make,
income.
but
That's
the
right.
money that you make is now earning interest, and you never did anything for that new $10 that you made.
Absolutely.
And then guess what? That $10 that you made that year is earning interest on it, and might earn an extra $10. And then when we talk about compounding,
Yeah.
right? So another simple question I usually ask people when I'm doing these types of seminars is like, would you rather have $1 million right now or a penny that doubled every day for 30 days?
Mm.
Right?
Mhm.
And the short answer is if you did the penny that doubled every day for 30 days, you would win,
Yeah.
right? And the funny thing is at the 27th day or the 28th day, you still are behind.
Yeah.
It's those last 2 days that all of a sudden
Mhm.
it compounds on
Yeah.
top of each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it's just a simple way of thinking about that compounding over a long period of time. Obviously, your money's not going to double every year.
Yeah.
But it's the same concept.
And that's good advice for young people
Mm-hmm.
who are probably just graduating from high school. Like you made the state the fact that he was 15 years old when he started.
Yep.
So that compound interest from when you're 15 to now he's an older gentleman.
Yes.
You know, it's a lot. And I see people getting out of high school, getting a job, say, you know, fast food place or some place that may not pay a whole lot right now, but dude, investing some of that money, especially if you're staying with your parents still, or your bills are low, like you haven't got children yet, you know, you're not paying for daycare yet, you know, take that money and put it aside now,
Yep.
and it'll make a huge difference.
So this is a really good, I guess, planning tip right now.
Okay, give me one.
So when you're talking about those young people in that situation you just described,
Yes.
one of the biggest things I talk about with younger people when I actually sit down with them is like, hey, while your expenses are low, yes, it's great that you're living at home, but guess what? When you move out, you're going to have what's called rent.
Mm-hmm.
And how much do you think it's going to be? And I asked them. It's like, oh, probably $1,200. Okay. And right now, how much are you paying towards rent? Okay, so what I'm going to tell you right now is that $1,200 that you would be paying towards rent, we need to be saving right now. So you're already building the habit, and it's not a shell shock when you move out and then all of a sudden your budget's different now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to figure out how am I going to save and also start paying this rent and all these new bills that I have. Start building it into your habit now while you don't have the actual obligations that you need to deal with right now.
Including taxes, right?
Yes.
You're paying very little taxes when you're making very little income,
Yes.
in which case that's the perfect time to set money aside for your future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because your life is only going to get more complicated. That's the biggest thing I'm trying to do. Is as simple as it's going to get. And if
Yeah.
we can't, and this is another thing, the reason why so many people that, win the lotto are broke 5 years later is because if you can't manage your money when you're dealing with $1,000 a month, you're not going to be able to manage it. A lot of people think, and this is back to what we were talking about with the wealth gap. A lot of people think if I just make more money, everything's going to be taken care of. But it's more about what do you do with your money and are you thinking strategically? So to answer your original question, it's hard for me to just give a blanketed recommendation to everybody because everybody's situation is very different and you need to make sure that what you're doing with your money, especially in times like this, is aligned with a goal-oriented, time-oriented outcome.
Love
Okay.
that. Love that.
Because when you're getting into investing just to invest money and just, oh, I just want to make money, I promise you that's a loser's game. And you're going to start making bad decisions at the wrong times. But if you know what your timeline is, you know what your goals are for that money, it's easier to make sure that the investments that you're making are aligned so that the money is there with the goal in mind that we were trying to accomplish.
Sure. So let's just talk easy, basic steps. There's got to be like some kind of algorithm or basic structure for which the people can follow, right? And I'm sure it changes based on age,
Yep.
life status. Are you married? Are you single? But let's just kind of take that and break that down.
Yep.
What does it look like when I'm younger and say I just got my first high school job? I did not work in high school because I was trying to be an academic, but go ahead.
So, to answer your question, probably the single most important thing I would say that when it comes to building wealth is a systematic habit of saving. As simple as it seems, that is quite literally, I tell people this all the time. If I'm sitting down with somebody, it's like, if you don't take anything else away from our conversation today and you just do this, I promise you're going to be better off than probably 70% of the population.
But I love that because it's simple and everybody can do it,
Well,
right?
because I can show you all the best places to put your money, but if we don't do it consistently,
If you don't have any money to put,
then it doesn't matter.
right?
Right?
Right.
And the biggest analogy, or I guess the concept I talk about with people is it's more important to do a little bit all the time than just a lot some of the time. Because some people might, I want to put 2,000 in this account, and then they might be another year or 2 years before they put anything else in there. I'd much rather somebody that saves $100 a month.
And when you say account, do you mean a checking account, a savings account, a broker account? What kind of account are we talking about?
So, Dr. Lee, the long story short, it doesn't even matter. It's more about the habit of doing it. And then once you have that habit down, it's easier to start putting it into different places aligned with what we're trying to do next. So in terms of building blocks, the first concept I like to make sure everybody understands, if nothing else, is you have to develop a habit, and this came right out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, of paying yourself first.
Pay yourself first, man.
Can I tell you, I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of people, myself included, think about being responsible, right? So when I started my business, decided I'm not going to take a salary and I'm not going to pay my husband either. Because I'm going to put it back into the business.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? COVID, right? And every relief package that came down from the federal government said you have to have this many employees, but also if you think about the PPP, you had to have a salary to be able to qualify. So guess what? Me trying to be fiscally responsible for the business did not do that, and it actually ended up hurting the business. So talk about that. Paying yourself first, investing in you.
And we're going to take it to even the simpler, because again, that's the business side. That's a whole nother side of like, hey, yes, absolutely. But even in the basic everyday person, what we usually see is, and again, I'm going to break it down like two different types of people when we talk about saving. The first type of saver, I'm being very general here, so obviously there's overlap, but most of the time, one of the people fall in one of these two categories, and they get paid, they pay off all their bills and expenses first. And then they're like, okay, I have this much left over for the rest of the month. I got to be conscious of my spending, live inside my budget, and then whatever's left over, if anything, that's what I'll save. And then at the end of the month, usually little to nothing is actually left there. And on the other side of the picture, what we encourage people to do is, instead of waiting, putting yourself at the bottom of that totem pole, put yourself at the top. Because 99% of the people I talk to, when they talk about what's most important in their life, it usually has to do with them or their family. It doesn't have to do with the Arby's, the Starbucks, the phones, the car companies that they're paying everybody else and their mom first before they're consistently, because again, most people don't miss their bills on a regular month. And it's funny how we prioritize other people's bills over our own personal lives. And so what I want you to understand is treat yourself like the most important bill that you ever have to pay, and do that every single month. And then that builds a good habit. So then when you have things like an emergency fund set up, that's when we can start looking at putting money in the stock market.
But that's also how you build an emergency fund.
That is exactly how.
Is by paying yourself first, making yourself your priority, right?
And then let's talk about psychologically what happens by doing these two types of things too. Psychologically, when you carve that money off up top, After you pay off all your bills, the money that's left over, it's like a freedom to spend account.
Yeah.
It's guilt-free spending because you know that's what that money's there for.
Mm.
Versus if you know you want to save something at the end of the month, every time you swipe that card in the back of your head, you have that little devil like, hey, and the angel like, hey, I don't know if we should do this. We wanted to save. The other guy's like, nah, you should totally do it. And then it's a battle every single time, right? And then worst case scenarios on the pay the bills and you try to save last, you get to the end of that month and you're like, oh, I need a couple $100. You cannot go back to Starbucks and say, hey, can I get back these 10 lattes because I need some money? It doesn't work like that because you already consumed it.
Yeah.
Versus if you just carve that money off top, guess what? If you need it, it is still there.
Yeah.
And then you can always tap back into it. But obviously the goal is that you're setting it off for that reason and then you're building it, and building it.
So
and
what
building
does
it.
an appropriate emergency fund look like? Everybody heard they need to have an emergency fund.
Yes.
There are different people saying different things, but the concept is the same. So
Yes.
what do you recommend?
So in my opinion, there's two things when I think about an emergency fund, and even like back to what you were even asking about basics, tactics. What we look at is a 20-60-20 model. 20% of your income should come off the top, go to your savings. 60% should be like your fixed bills and expenses. And that last 20% should be all your fun money stuff that you want to do daily.
Say that one more time, Professor.
20-60-20. 20% for yourself and savings, 60% for those fixed expenses, and 20% for that fun stuff that you want to do on a monthly basis.
That sounds like something that's going to be on YouTube.
See, nice little quick clip,
Yeah,
right?
quick clip. Yeah, that's how we do those.
So that's the first step, right?
Yeah.
And then the emergency fund is the next step. Well, that's the goal in terms of with the strategy is, okay, let me break up my budget 20-60-20. The next step is the goal to get the emergency funded. When we talk about that emergency fund, like you said, it can be different for a lot of different people, but for general purposes, assuming that you don't have like very variable income and things like that, it's 3 to 6 months of living expenses. The reason for 3 to 6 months is we see 3 months on the low end is enough time that, because one of the biggest risks that you face is if you lose your income. And if you get laid off or you physically can't work, 3 months is a long enough time for hopefully you can find another job. And it's long enough time for things like long-term disability to kick in to cover your income. We say 6 months is on the high end because oftentimes if you're sitting on more than 6 months sitting in cash and there's no purpose for that money, like you're not saving it for a down payment on a house, you're not saving it for something specifically, and you're just saving just to save, what we see is all you're doing, and again, it's a little bit of a joke, but it's definitely some truth to it, is all you're doing is going broke slowly. Because if your money's sitting in cash earning absolutely nothing, and then again, like we saw inflation last year at 9%, if you were sitting on $100,000 in your bank account, you might as well take $9,000 out every year and just burn it. Because that's how much your money is worth that next year, right? And I've never seen anybody that needed like more than 6 months of their living expenses all at once. Right? Usually we can plan on how to get that money back to you. And the reason why we want to start with the emergency fund, because in my opinion, rule number one when it comes to investing is we never want to lose clients' money. Rule number one. And what I find is when it comes to when you have a sound portfolio that is actually properly allocated, when I say allocated, it just means what kind of investments are in there. You only lose money if you need the money and it's not a good time. Because like you said, it's a weird market right now. And in the short term, the stock market is very unpredictable. But when we look at 5, 10, 15-year time periods, it becomes very predictable.
So tell me about that portfolio and those different vehicles that we can use to put our money in. What are these bonds, mutual funds, ETFs? What are those differences? What are they?
Yep. So most commonly, what people think of as stocks. So stock is you're just purchasing an ownership share in a company. So Apple, you can go buy stock in Apple. You can go buy stock in Amazon, right? And what you're betting on is that as the company improves, the value of your share is also going to be bigger. Okay. When we talk about bonds, bonds are buying debt inside of a company. So these are considered to be the safe assets because if a company wants to stay in business, they have to pay their creditors first. Okay. So reason why stocks are risky, considered more risky, because you can get high risk or high returns, right? The reason is because you're betting on that company and their performance. There's no guarantee that they're going to take off that year or if they're going to do worse than they did the year before. right?
Yeah.
But again, bonds are a little bit more consistent because they have an interest rate that is associated with a coupon rate that's associated with it that you get the payments for. And then at the end of that term, you get your initial investment back. Okay. So that's how bonds work. One is ownership in a company, one is debt inside of a company. ETFs are considered what we call index funds. And so they usually track whatever indexes we talk about. So a lot of people say, I just want to invest in the S&P 500. You can't necessarily invest directly in the S&P 500, but you can invest in an index fund that mirrors the S&P 500. Okay.
Which is the top 500 companies.
Top 500 companies. Yep. And domestic companies.
And ETF stands for what?
Exchange traded funds. Okay.
And the other one is the mutual fund.
Mutual funds. So mutual funds is definitely the space that I live in, and this is what way I work with a lot of my clients. Okay. Because essentially all a mutual fund is just a pool of thousands of those stocks and bonds put into the same investment. So rather than you or me having to sit behind a computer and trying to find the right company out of the thousands of companies that are out there, and because again, when we talk about what really drives 90% of stock market returns are really two factors. And this is something I even learned through my board certification. It really comes down to asset allocation. So what industry sectors are you investing in? And human behavior.
Yeah.
Because it's our own worst enemy, like I said, and we make decisions emotionally. That other 10% is really based off of what I would say majority of people want to spend 90% of their time thinking about. Individual stock selection and stock market timing, which no one has been able to figure out consistently over a long period of time, because not only do you have to be right in terms of what's the right stock to get in, you have to know when's the right time to get out and when's the right time to get into the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have to be able to repeat that over and over and over. So when we talk about a mutual fund being a pool of thousands of companies, and these fund managers are people that have managed these funds for 30 plus years, they have track records of their actual performance, you can see that they are the ones that are actually behind that computer screen picking those companies to put into your portfolio. And this is when we talk about a diversified portfolio.
Yeah.
And what diversification just means is not having all your eggs in one basket, because we know if that basket drops, there goes your money.
So lower risk.
Lower risk. You're diversifying your risk. Because again, the example I use is even 15 years ago, if you just wanted to pick a hot stock, it might look at something like Blockbuster.
Yeah, we saw how that turned out.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to rent a movie on a Friday night, family movie nights, and all this stuff, right?
Sounds emotional.
Right? Oh, I loved Blockbuster.
I do too.
But 5 years later, they don't even exist, right? I think there's one that still is in existence, right?
They're still getting a little love.
One Blockbuster?
Yeah, I think it's like
Did
in
not know
Alaska.
Yeah, they had a documentary on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did not know that. Missed that.
So I share that story with you because, again, at the time, they were one of the biggest companies, but something as simple as a new competitor, industry change,
Industry disruption, baby.
just like that, the one company that you thought couldn't lose,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, now your money's gone.
Yep.
But if we can put it in a pool of funds that is diversified across thousands of companies, if one goes under, we have all these other ones to pick us back up.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. There's a really popular trend right now, is this cryptocurrency. And everybody wants to get a piece of this cryptocurrency. Now, I know how I feel about investing in it, but when you talk about balanced portfolios, should crypto or an ETF containing a bunch of them, be something that people should look at?
Or even beyond that, do you even recommend crypto?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is at the end of the day, what I would say is this, in my opinion, especially as because again, as a CFP,
Yes, please.
one of our roles is to we have a fiduciary standard, so we always have to act in the best interest of our clients.
That's what fiduciary
That's what
means. Okay.
fiduciary means. Okay, so legally, I have an obligation that if I don't act in my client's best interest, they can sue me, even if it's something that they want to do, like talk about cryptocurrency. Because again, if it's not proven, that's not me acting in my client's best interest. Everything in cryptocurrency land right now is very speculative. Doesn't mean you can't make money there. You absolutely can. I know plenty of people that have, right? But I'm not going to tell you to do that because my job is to be generally right rather than specifically wrong, right?
I like that.
And then when we
Like
talk
that.
about what's going on with cryptocurrency, what I see is very similar to like when we talk about the dot-com bubble burst. And I'm not saying I'm thinking that this is exactly what's going on, but
That happened.
it's very similar.
Yeah.
Going into the 2000s, the internet was a big thing. Everybody thought if you had a website, you make tons of money. And then they started realizing, most of these websites are just websites, but there's no business, there's no cash flow, there's no products, there's no services. It's just a website.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, that bubble popped.
Mm-hmm.
And then 9/11 happened, that recession.
Right.
Right now, what we're seeing is when we think about cryptocurrency, everybody even knows that half of them were literally created as a joke. Like
Sure.
Dogecoin was literally a joke, and then it took off,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So again, there's no real cash flows or anything backing it, and so that's why it's hard for us to really value cryptocurrency, because it's all just based off of right now personal value, which again, those things change over cycles.
Yeah.
So when I tell my clients that are looking at cryptocurrency, it's like, yeah, if that's really what you want to do, okay, we still have a plan with everything else we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to put into that cryptocurrency account is the same money that you would take to Vegas, because
Right.
that's what you're doing right
Money
now.
that you're
Right.
betting to lose.
Or the money
You're
that's
okay.
expendable.
You're
right?
okay with losing.
Yeah.
Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's literally what I tell people. Is like, look, if you're going to invest in, that's fine. Just make sure you invest money that you're okay if you never actually see it again. But it's okay if you want to
So
take a
it
gamble.
can be part of your
it.
strategy. It should not necessarily
Your
be your
strat-
whole strategy unless you're a very high risky type of person and you like to live on the edge.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much, right?
Okay.
Like I said, it can absolutely, it has its space in a lot of people's portfolios, and it aligns with what they were looking to do, and they
And
might
the
believe in it.
metaverse.
They might understand a little bit more of like what actual happens with cryptocurrency and
Yeah.
how it works. And then if that's your wheelhouse, but let's not, the money that we're planning on living our life off of,
Yes. So
Let's
you
put
have
that
to
there.
build the foundation, and that's what's going to hold everything up. And then you
Exactly.
can take
You
more
can take
risk
more
or
risk.
liberties or whatever.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
So let's talk about life.
Mhm.
I have some friends that are getting to the point where they are starting to lose their parents or losing some loved ones, and there was no life insurance there.
Mhm.
And I believe that's something that's important. Would you say? Why is life insurance so important?
Life insurance is probably one of the top things that I talk about with every single one of my clients, because it's one of those things that oftentimes we don't want to think about.
Right.
And again, when we talk about financial advisors that just want to manage assets, it's a much easier conversation just to talk about all the sunshine and roses and we're going to make your money grow, but not talk about, hey, what would we do if you're not here? That's a tougher conversation to have.
Mhm.
Okay. And the way I look at it is if you love someone or you owe someone, then you need some life insurance at the end of the day. Okay. That's a very simple rule of thumb that I have.
Yeah.
Because I see it because people with lots of money, it doesn't matter. You still need some form of life insurance. And one of the biggest things, especially in communities of color, what I try to also explain is that's the number one way to build generational wealth, right? When we talk about always leaving the next generation with a step up, life insurance is the only way that you can guarantee that to happen.
Right.
Because again, there's still risk if you have all your money that you built up and you have millions of dollars in your portfolio, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into retirement, you're spending it all, and then you're trying to deal with the dynamic of, well, I did want to leave something, but I kind of want to still live my life while I'm still here, and I still have all this money to spend, and then all of a sudden you have long-term care expenses that creep up in the back end, and you're spending an extra $80,000 a year to pay for in-home nursing care
MIT.
or anything like that, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, that $2 million portfolio is not what you thought you were leaving behind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I say, especially when we talk about like whole life or permanent insurance, what you're really doing is purchasing incremental chunks of your net worth that you will leave behind, whether it's a day from now or 100 years from now, that you can also still leverage for other things along the way. And so that's where we talk about life insurance and just the importance of it, just because at the end of the day, it's funny how many times I sit there and I'll talk to people and they talk about all the plans that they have. And then I ask them about life insurance. They're like, oh yeah, that's not important. And it's like, well, hold on. You just said you wanted to do this. You want to do this with your family. You want your family to be able to have this. And so you're telling me if you're not here, you'd rather them be worse off?
Yeah. So,
Does it make sense?
all life insurance though is not equal.
No.
There are different types of life insurance. And so
Yes.
some of them, I feel like it's kind of like you just keep putting water in that bucket with a hole in it. versus the type that you actually can use as your own bank once you've built up enough.
Yep.
Let's talk about that, because I think people don't understand that, and they're more than happy to keep just putting
Yeah.
money in that bucket with the hole in it.
Yep. So the most common types of life insurance is really term insurance. That's what
Mhm.
most people think of when they think of life insurance.
Mhm.
On the other end of the spectrum is what we call permanent insurance. And the way I would distinguish the two, the easiest way is term insurance is like a rental policy. And permanent insurance is like owning your house. Okay? The first thing you're going to notice when you look at the numbers is the upfront price tag is really cheap with this term policy. It might be $20 a month for $500,000 of coverage, but what you need to know is that is going to expire. This one over here for that same $500,000, it might be $500 a month.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest things I try to make sure people understand, there's a big difference between price and cost. Because price is what you pay for something, but cost is what value you have for the money that you've paid.
Mhm.
And what we see is when you fast forward like 10 to 15 years in, number one, term insurance has the highest net cost because frankly, you only get a benefit of it
Yep.
if you die inside of that term.
Right.
So it's like a bet, and it's probably the only bet you hope you lose because it means you're still alive at the end of that term,
Sure.
right? So again, you have absolutely nothing to show for that money. It's very similar to, like, again, you fast forward 10 years into renting and your landlord kicks you out, you have nothing to show for it.
Mhm.
Versus when we talk about this permanent or building your own bank, infinite banking system, things like that, it's putting all this money into something that's called permanent life insurance or cash value based life insurance. And then along the way, what you're doing, it's a lot more expensive, but you're building equity every single year that you pay. And then usually around years 10 to 15 is where it breaks even in terms of how much you put in is what you have. And then it's only compounding and earning more and more than what you ever put into it.
Yep.
And so we use this as a unique cash savings vehicle. It's not meant to replace your investments, but it's meant to be a more efficient way to save cash. That's the work of $1 doing two things for you. If you live a nice, long, healthy life,
Yep.
you have all that cash that's been growing in there that
Yep.
you can use along the way. And we even talk about how that's not even tied to the stock market because it's guaranteed to never
Yep.
lose money.
Yep.
So what that does is it allows you to even be more aggressive, like we were talking about on the other side.
It allows you more flexibility and liquidity.
Yes.
Because a lot of the investments, that money's tucked away, you cannot access it, or if you do, you pay these big fines.
Yes.
Very different with the cash value
Yeah.
life insurance. So if y'all don't know about that, I would recommend you check it out.
Yep.
I think that this has been a fantastic discussion with our local professor, Harrison Hunter, our financial genius, CFP.
P.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So that's perfect.
No, yeah, you're good.
Stay tuned, y'all. Harrison, you want to make the announcement, Rodney?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, drum roll, please. Is one of our newest board members for the Colorado Springs Black Chamber of Commerce, and we are
Yep.
so happy to have him. And I think that you can see the level of knowledge that he will be bringing to our board. If you do not have a CFP in your life, let me introduce you to this man right here. As much as I'd love to keep having conversation because I love spending time with you, we got to wrap this up.
Absolutely.
CSLI 2019, best class ever.
Not
Thank
really.
you, everybody, for
Yeah, the COVID year. Yeah, COVID year.
Nobody is as hardy as we are.
thank you for joining us for this episode of the show. Harrison, thank you for being on the show with us. Big ups to our lovely co-host.
Your disruptor.
Yeah, the best. Disruption is the way to do it. And check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, like, share, and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.